Welcome to lesson 04-2, procedures. This is a kind of really cool, fun, little system that we're going to start getting into. If you've been having troubles with any of the prior stuff, I recommend kind of going back and getting some help before diving into this because starts to get really complex. First thing that we want to do, though, is we want to talk about kind of how you perform a large task. And this can be in computer programming. It can also just kind of be in life of, hey, I have this really large task to perform. The best way to go about this is to divide your project into smaller tasks. Make them into kind of bite-sized chunks, things that you can easily take care of. There's a famous quote of, "The journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step." Choose something that's small but related to your task that can help you get there. Rome wasn't built in a day. There's another saying for you of do a whole bunch of smaller tasks that lead up to your big one, and it makes things a lot easier. Also, don't procrastinate. I know I personally struggle with that. I like to procrastinate stuff, but don't procrastinate and divide your stuff into smaller tasks. Do each task individually. It's really tempting to try and just jump around and do a whole bunch of things all at once, and to use another saying from you is I think it was Bruce Lee that said, "I don't fear the man that has practiced 1,000 kicks one time. I fear the man that has practiced one kick 1,000 times." So focus on one task and get that one accomplished before moving on to the next one. Now, admittedly, there are times where you just need that little brain break. You need to go and step away from the project. That's totally fine. But make sure you bring yourself back from time to time and try and focus on just that one, maybe two things. Test each task. Every time you add something new, test it. Make sure it works. Make sure it doesn't break anything that you're working with. With Scratch, it's a little hard to break something in Scratch, but it is good to make sure that you're still getting the same result whenever we make a change. And that's going to be the big thing whenever we talk about procedures is we want to test that we're still getting the same result. And it's good that we're actually getting the same result over and over and over again. That seems a little weird, but you'll see why. So once each task is completed and checked, making sure that your task is going to work, we're going to go ahead and bring those pieces back together and add them to our project. My big recommendation is add those pieces as you can, as soon as you can, so that then you could find any bugs or issues as soon as possible. And I just talked about that, how each section test it. So divide and conquer is this big idea of dividing our tasks into smaller parts and making it so that it's actually in bite-sized chunks that we can actually, digest and take care of. As you get older, even things like house projects, it's really tempting to be like, yes, I'm going to build the entire house in a day. Well, any contractor or person that builds a house will tell you is like, no, that's not going to happen. You need to choose the bits and pieces that you're going to do. You're going to bring all these parts together, and it's something going to work. All right. This process is used over and over again. If you think of video games and stuff like that, there's no way that, there are ways, but it takes forever for one person to design a game. Especially if you think of a AAA game. Those are really, if you don't know gaming terms, that's the really big games that are really cool and really awesome. But to do a AAA game, it takes a team of programmers and a team of developers to work together and do this. All right. So let's talk about procedures. What are procedures? So procedures are sections of code that perform a particular task. Remember that acronym DRY, don't repeat yourself? This is where procedures come. That's where procedures are. Procedures are how you prevent yourself from repeating yourself. So procedures can be called from the main program or inside of another procedure. You can have a procedure that calls a procedure, and it can just go down that line. Now, there is a point where you're like, okay, this should just kind of be fixed somehow. But you have a lot of these procedures. You will use this a lot to initialize data and variables. Pretty much from now on for the rest of Scratch, you're going to be creating a procedure called initialize. You can use it to draw shapes, do computations, play notes, all that type of thing. Once you have something dialed, you can make it a procedure and you're like, got it. Programs are simplified by using procedures to perform tasks. The more procedures that we have, the more simplified our program seems, and it looks a lot nicer, really. So we're going to go ahead and rewrite the warm-up. We're going to use this divide and conquer process along with the procedures to write up the warm-up. So what we're going to notice is that the warm-up drew two squares of the same size, but we rewrote the code for this twice. We had two groups of code drawing squares. It's okay, it happens. And what I really want to, what I would like to point out is it's okay to not be efficient your first time through. In fact, I kind of recommend you're not. Because you can go back and you can look at your code and you say, hey, I was repeating myself right here. This could be simplified into a better piece. And you can go back and you can edit code and make it so it looks nicer and behaves better. So looking at the precision of squares, the only difference was the starting angle, which we can take care of. So again, like I said, it'd be nice to be able to call a procedure square, and it just draws a square for us. And it'll reduce the amount of code, make it easier to understand, don't have to provide as many comments because we don't have to comment like on each individual one separately. So we're going to start with the warm-up we wrote, and we're going to create a procedure called square. So if I go to Scratch here, let's see, there's my Scratch. So where you make procedures is down here where it says My Blocks. So go ahead and click on My Blocks and click Make a Block. In this one, we're actually going to change this name to read as Square. And we're going to click OK. And we're going to see this thing that says Define Square. You'll notice I don't have the warm-up on here. It's just to make it so it's a little less cluttered for you guys to see. I'll add it in as we need it. So Define Square. All right. One second. I think I just messed up on me. So what we're going to do is we're going to define what square is. Now, this defining square doesn't actually do anything. And that seems weird. Like, it doesn't do anything because we're not going to tell it to. But let's go ahead and build this. So to make a square, I know that we repeat 4 times. And we're going to go grab that move block. Move 75, and we're going to turn 90. I know from experience that this is how you draw a square. In fact, I could even go so far as grab a pen, events here, motion, go to 0, 0, erase all, put my pen down. And so if I do this, you'll notice that Scratch doesn't do anything. Even though we said right here, move 75 and turn 90, it's not actually doing anything. And so what we have to do is we actually need to call the procedure. And actually we had it turned, so I like to put a point direction in my kind of first steps. And I want to be able to see this. Show, hide. So I'm going to go to My Blocks, and you'll notice there's now a kind of block here that says square. And so I'm going to put square right here. Now if I push play, I have my square. Awesome. All right. Now, this was nice, but what we want to do next and what we want to add into next is called a parameter. Oops. There we go. Now you can see it. So we're going to create what's called a parameter. Oops, did all that. Yep. So parameters is a variable that we can use in the definition of the block. It's something that the block expects. It expects some kind of value to come in, and it's going to use it. And this creates, if you think back to a few lessons ago, we talked about this. It's called a local variable, and it exists only inside of this specific procedure. A lot of times I see kids, they try and take the parameter and take it outside of the procedure. It doesn't work because it only exists to that one specific procedure and for that time that that procedure exists. You can think of this procedure as once it's called, it exists, and once it's done being called, it disappears. It's no longer a part of the code. It's used a lot by procedure functions. We're going to use this to modify how we can make squares of different sizes. And so what we need to do is we need to send it the size that we want. And so what we're going to do is we're going to edit the procedure in the more blocks section. So let's see if I switch back. I can right click or 2-finger click if you're using your Chromebook on square and click on edit. you'll see that there are several options here. There's add an input number text, add an input boolean, and add a label. We're going to add an input number or text. And we can name this. And it just like with any other variable, it is important for us to pay attention to our variable names. They should make sense, and they should do what we need to kind of have done. So this is changing the size. So let's change this to be size. And we're going to click on OK. Now what you'll notice is this square that we have over here now has this kind of blank spot. And then the definition of square now has a value called size. Well, size is going to dictate how big our square is. So I'm going to take size and I'm going to replace it for 75. Now, the number that I replaced was 75, so I'm going to go back here. I'm going to type in 75. I'm going to kind of take note of what my square looks like, and I'm going to push the play button. It looks exactly the same. That's good. Like, a lot of people are like, but it didn't change. Yes, that's the idea, is it didn't change. It's still having the same, like, interaction regardless of, you know, that we just made that small little change. Whenever you're making changes, make them small, test them, make sure they work. No reason to kind of like jump way out there. All right, now let's take this a step farther. Let's go ahead and make a variable, and we're going to call it side size. Now you can probably guess what side size is going to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here, and right up here, I'm going to grab side size, and I'm going to, yeah, you thought so, I'm going to set it to 75. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to then take this and put it in here and say run. You're like, all right, awesome, cool, that's still working. Now let's try changing this. Let's try making it 100. Awesome, it got a little bigger. Okay. Try changing some stuff around. But now, let's try doing something as well. So, what if I did this? What if I go to motion, change this to 90, and oh, that duplicates all of it. I don't want that. Let's do this. What does that do? Hey, all right. So I was able to draw two squares. Cool. Pretty easy, yeah? Now, this is cool and all, but let's try changing it up a little bit. Let's make it so that it's inside a repeat value. Let's see. Oops, no. Control Z. Yeah, I want to keep the hide. Let's have it turn 45 degrees because 90 is just kind of boring. And then under control, let's get a repeat. Hide could be on the outside. It doesn't ultimately matter where the side is, like just, but it's better practice for it to be on the outside because you don't need to hide it so many times because it never shows itself in there. So I'm going to repeat 8 times. This is a lot like one of the previous things that we worked on. And hey, look at that. All right, that's pretty cool. So your assignment, and actually I guess I can switch you back to your assignment list so you can actually see this. Let's see here. There it is. All right. So your assignment is to write a Scratch program using procedures with parameters to make an original design of your own making. You need to call procedures to draw your shapes, so no like turn left type situations and draw and stuff like that. Make it original. Have 3 shapes that are different sizes, translations, or rotations from each other. At least 2 different colors, so change those colors up, and comment on all of your code like always. Try adding triangles, try adding rectangles. Just kind of have fun with this, yeah? Hopefully this is helpful. Have a good one.